What does one do on an individual level if they find themselves in such a society where individualism has taken hold, and they can't necessarily easily change the society? Are there day-to-day, week-to-week choices that I'm making that are pushing me away from that meaning and purpose and sort of collective, I guess, sense of responsibility? Like the individual listening to this now that completely agrees with you finds himself as being a lonely person and goes, "What do I do about this, Jordan?"
Well, one of the things you do with disagreeable people who are more inclined by temperament to be competitive and attain victory for themselves is one of the exercises you can do with disagreeable people. If you're a disagreeable extrovert, you tend to be narcissistic. And the problem with that, technically, is that you alienate people. And the problem with that is, well, you're hypersocial. So if you alienate people, well, then you don't have anyone. And not only is that lonesome, but it's also extremely impractical. I mean, you certainly, and no doubt, learned this more as you become successful. It's like you need a team. And the more tightly knit it is, and the more you're all working in the same direction, the better everything works. Well, it's not useful to be a narcissist because maybe you get what you want right now, this time. But as a propagating strategy across time, it's a degenerating game. Okay, so what do? Well, instead of thinking about what you want, or even thinking about how to strategize in relationship to your goals, you might think about what you could do for other people, or you could think about what you would do if you only did what was true and right. Those are very different orientations, right? And the religious orientation fundamentally is the orientation towards what is true and right. And you might say, well, I don't know what's true and right. It's like, yeah, kind of, because our knowledge is bounded and we're ignorant. So do we understand the nature of the highest good? Well, no, but it's a very rare person who doesn't know some of the time when they're doing something wrong. And it's also a non-existent person who doesn't have some concept of the good, because you can't act without a concept of the good, because you act towards a goal you deem desirable. So that's up. I mean, unless you're trying to make your life worse, and people do that from time to time, but we'll leave that as an exception. I mean, you have to have descended into hell in a way before you're in a situation where you're actively working to make your own life worse. That can happen. But assuming that you're relatively well embedded in the realm of the normal, then you're moving towards something better always, because otherwise there's no motivation. We know this technically. This isn't even disputable. So the positive emotion systems that make you enthusiastic, so that fill you with the desire to move towards a goal, independent of fear, say, because you could move towards a safety goal because you're afraid. But imagine you're trying to accomplish something. You have a goal. The positive emotion systems operate to track progress to the goal. Positive emotion is a consequence of evidence of movement towards a desired goal. Okay, so now you have a proximal goal. Like our proximal goal right now might be just to, like in the most micro level possible, might be to display facial signs of interest in the conversation, right? It's a very micro goal, but then that's nested in our desire to have an interesting conversation on the topic we're having right now, and then inside the podcast as a whole, and then as part of the podcast enterprise that you're involved in, as part of the book enterprise, let's say, that I'm involved in, that's nested inside our view of the world, right? So you see there are nestings of the good that have no upper limit. That's Jacob's ladder, by the way. And at the top of that is the good itself, which is the divine for all intents and purposes.
Divine, what do you mean by that?
That's a definition. That's what I mean, is that in the hierarchy of what's good, the divine is the peak.
The top, okay.
Right. Now, I don't know what that is. That's also an insistence in the biblical texts, by the way. In the final analysis, the divine is ineffable. It's not definable. And it's beyond you. And that's partly because there's a practical reason for that even. You know this as well. As you move towards a goal, let's say you attain a goal. Okay, now you've accomplished. Well, are you done? It's like, no, a new potential goal emerges, a new pinnacle. And then maybe you'll accomplish that, but then a new one exists. And so you could say that the domain of opportunity is limitless. Right, because the thing that's at the pinnacle recedes as you approach it. And you could say that's a technical definition of God, which is accurate. That is a technical definition of God. God is the good towards which all goods point. These are definitions again, remember. They're not proclamations of faith, they're definitions. So we obviously all believe that all good things share something in common, because otherwise we wouldn't have the category good. And then we all believe that there are rank orders of good, because otherwise everything good would be equally worth pursuing. No one believes that. So there's a rank order. Well, if there's a rank order towards some end or some pinnacle, you can also think about it as a foundation. Depends on which metaphorical landscape you want to inhabit. Then the question becomes, well, how do you characterize that which is the ultimate aim, that which is and should be the ultimate aim? Well, the stories on which our culture is predicated characterize that in story.
Do you think many people have an ultimate aim in their mind?
They do, whether they know it or not.
What do you mean by that? So like the average person listening to this now, are they conscious at all of what they're...
No, but it's implicit.
Okay.
One of the things the psychoanalytic thinkers insisted on, Carl Jung in particular, was that everybody acts out a story. Sometimes it's a tragic story. Sometimes it's the story of hell. Like, you're trapped in a story, one way or another. Now, do you know the contours of your story? Not necessarily. I mean, people are often very bad at describing themselves. They don't know what they're up to. That doesn't mean they're not up to something. And you could also think about them as the battleground between warring stories. That also happens. That just means they're fractionated in their psyche. Yeah, they're being pulled in many directions at the same time.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.